Recording is on.
All right. Okay, we're recording now. So Joanna, over to you. Sorry about the late start.
No worries. I'm just seeing how I can share my screen. Let's see here. My PowerPoint is not showing up in the window. Oh, here we go. Got it. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I am going to, there we go. I'm not able to see you folks, unfortunately, while I'm running this. So if you have any questions, can you just jump in with your mic? Feel free to interrupt me. I'm not going to be upset about it. Okay. I just don't know why I can't, with my full screen engaged, also see you folks. So I created a short PowerPoint. I'm happy to pause and engage in discussion or address questions as we move through it. So again, don't hesitate to interject. So I called this Tales of Deprogramming, from a Christian Evangelical Upbringing to Palestine Solidarity Activism. I find that I'm receiving a lot of questions from individuals who are unfamiliar with Christian Zionism, wanting to understand why it is that certain Christian denominations support Israel's expansionist project and why others don't. As I was raised as a Lutheran evangelical, I had to go through a very kind of specific deprogramming myself. So I'll just see if I can advance this now. Let's see. Okay. First, I'll just acknowledge that I'm coming today from the Niagara Region of Ontario, Canada, which is on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe Haudenosaunee peoples, and it's subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement, which you can see the wampum belt there pictured. And many First Nations peoples are still living and working on this territory today. So a lawyerly disclaimer, I'm just sharing my personal experiences. This is not in any way meant to speak broadly or paint all Christianity or Christian Zionism with one brush. There's a lot of diversity that exists within Christian communities, like any other faith community. So again, I'm just locating this particular presentation of my own experience and how I started from a particular upbringing and came to where I am today. So I don't know if you folks have watched the documentary Israelism. Has anyone? Feel free to engage your mic if you have. Has anyone watched it?
Yeah, a few members have. Yeah.
Okay, great. So I take my inspiration from this film, this documentary film that was released last year, which documents two young American Jews that were raised to unconditionally love Israel, and the process of their deprogramming from that sociocultural indoctrination. And I kind of took that documentary and applied it maybe to my own situation and thinking, what was my trajectory in going from a very specific, almost like a Bible literalist or like a Christian fundamentalist point of view to where I am today. And it really has a lot to do with my father. And I promise some folks, I know some people will be watching the recording, but I said I'd put in a few family photos. If you look at the upper left-hand corner of this slide, you'll see my parents' wedding day. They're in their early 20s. And you can see at the kind of the right side of the image, my great-grandmother, who's a Mennonite.
Joanna,
yeah.
We're actually seeing your PowerPoint, not the presentation screen, but the actual PowerPoint itself. So I'm guessing you're on slide 5?
Yes.
Okay, so we don't see that. We're still seeing slide 1.
Oh, shoot. Yeah. That's too bad. I had...
Okay, now we can see it. So we're seeing your, I guess maybe you have two screens and we're seeing...
Maybe I can... Let's try this. Sorry about that. Give me one moment to correct the technical issue. I apologize. I had a bunch of slides beforehand. All right.
Sorry we missed those.
That's okay. Let's try it again. I'm not used to this particular. I'm used to Zoom. All right. So
yeah, even this works too. Like if it works for you.
Okay, we can keep it this way, I think. Yeah. Okay, so you missed it on these beautiful slides I made for you at the beginning. Oh, that's okay.
You'll be in the recording.
It's going to be in the recording. Okay, so
thank you.
We're on slide 5 now.
Okay.
Oh, there's sound effects in this application. I heard laughter in the background. Okay, so you'll see here, this is an image of my parents' wedding day, and you'll see my Mennonite great-grandmother in this image. So I on my father's side, descended from Mennonites that settled in the Niagara region, were farmers here. And from that perspective, that was our originating denomination of Christianity. But my father kind of brought the family on this journey towards evangelicalism in the late 70s and early 80s. And it's really interesting. He gave me this book that he prepared when I was a baby. And if you read it, he talks about these tent revivals that were coming through the Niagara region. So do folks know what a tent revival is? I can see you now, so just see if anyone knows what a tent revival is. So what would happen would be these traveling ministers that would go town to town, and they would either rent out a hall or they'd erect a great big tent in a field, and people would come out and hear the ministry of this traveling evangelist. My father got very interested in that. So you can see him actually documenting in my baby book the Sutera twins that were like a well-known evangelical missionaries that would go throughout the United States and Canada and conduct these revival meetings. My father was a big fan, and he would say, "Oh, saw the Sutera twins again, PTL, praise the Lord." And this was not kind of a normal attitude within my family. It was my father who kind of turned towards a more evangelical Christianity in the 80s and late 70s. And just to kind of give you a notion here, Mennonites are more of a pacifist, nonviolent group with strong community ties. In my father's kind of conversion to Lutheranism, Lutheran evangelicalism, he became more focused on the Bible as the sole source of religious authority, and a strong current or thematic current in this kind of his new faith was a faith in God in an absolutist way. Complete faith was required for salvation. So quite a cultural shift within my family. And my father brought along a lot of his brothers and sisters to these revivals. And I found some old records of this morality, like renewed morality. So it's like the late 70s and early 80s, very anti-drug rhetoric, very anti-crime rhetoric started to be kind of baked into these new Christian movements within the US and Canada. And just some key points of evangelical Lutheranism that was being preached at these events, these revival events. There was a focus on the gospel, that is salvation through faith in Jesus. The Bible was considered the supreme authority on all matters. A person's individual conversion was really central to the faith. So it wasn't just a matter of showing up and participating as a member of the community. You really had to show like this lifelong commitment as an individual through to these Christian values and conversion of self. And evangelizing is a core principle. So there's a strong current within this denomination to share the gospel, and even better if it can impact almost every aspect of your social engagement, even in secular spaces. And some evangelical Lutherans, not all, but some, believe in biblical inerrancy. And this is a really important point, which is a literal interpretation of the Bible. So my father would study the Bible as if it was a science textbook, for example, or a history book. He took it very literal in that sense. And so, as you can understand, with the Old Testament and the New combined together with this particular denomination, they would also take a very literal interpretation of the Old Testament, which has its, again, it's also, one would understand that earlier iterations of that would be also what would evolve into the Torah. So already you're seeing some ideological commonalities between Judaism and especially with like Bible literalists, evangelical Christians. So let me move here. I'm not going to focus on this too much. It's just basically, if you read some of the old pamphlets, they're talking about people staying for whole days and having these kind of embodied experiences of faith, this afterglow of these tent revivals. Sometimes 200 people would stay after, and they'd have a follow-up meetings to 4 a.m. So there's a real sense of like an aspect of embodiment that came with this revival, movement within the U.S. and Canada as well. What did that mean for me as a teenager or growing up in a household that was a Bible literate or a Bible that took the Bible literally and had this strong current of evangelical faith? There was a very strict censorship of what information I could consume or what media I could consume. So I could only read things that were Christian or Christian adjacent, deemed to be wholesome. So my music was strictly censored, books, television, films. I couldn't watch anything with like any kind of magical themes to it. Like as a little girl, even I was forbidden to watch like the Care Bears because they had magic, and magic is of the devil, right? So, so it's a very intense kind of list of rules that you're subject to. And as I grew up, I would go through room searches. So my father would go through my room and he'd pull out anything that would be deemed as contraband, like secular content or popular music, for example. Social life was centered around the church. So that church maybe 3 to 5 days a week. Our entire lives kind of rotated around the church. And there was a lot of parental interference in my education within the public system. So, and you see this now increasing, like, so what I was experiencing was kind of the early iterations of what we're seeing expressed more loudly now, I'd say, from the far right, the political far right in Canada. At the time I was growing up, my father was very offended by anything that was related to evolution or geology. So if I was learning about the earth being how many billion years old, he, as a Bible literalist, believes that the earth is actually a little more than 6,000 years old. Like it's very literal interpretation of the Bible. And there's this whole industry of Christian Science writing where they take passages of the Bible and then just kind of, I don't know, then they'll find an artifact in some place and they'll make a huge leap and say, look, man walked along dinosaurs, and here's the proof, kind of thing. But that was our church had a library with those kinds of resources, but it was strictly, those resources were within the parameters of this Bible literalism. A lot of indoctrination practices at home. So I had to memorize passages of the Bible, be able to recite them. I had to read 1 chapter a day. I was tested on it. If I couldn't, let's say I didn't have enough time to read my chapter of the Bible. Some of them are really long. And if I didn't get that one chapter in, I'd be punished. And the punishment would be something kind of pointless and intended to, it was more psychological. So I would have to wash the walls, for example. I'd have to go wash every wall in part of the house, and I'd, on a step ladder. So I'd be washing the walls like once or twice a week sometimes. Or, so there's the punishments, again, were meant to kind of break down your resistance to the indoctrination. Also, a lot of phobic discourse in my home regarding all things non-Christian. So my parents were homophobic, forget, any space for persons, like, they take a very strong position that, trans people are extremely dangerous. They view it as like, so just very cruel, homophobic, transphobic discourse. Also very xenophobic. My parents were very racist. So anything kind of outside of their concept of a righteous world was seen anything strange or different was seen as of the devil, right? Because it didn't fit within their concept of what the Bible commanded. So I'm not going to lie, it was pretty rough. And even our engagement with the broader world was very centered around, it was almost like we existed within a bubble. So our camp, Camp Kakwa, was a Lutheran evangelical camp, right? So the same ideology. We'd go there every year. We would not go anywhere else. The music I was made to listen to, this is a band called DC Talk, right? And it was a, kind of alternative rock in the early 90s. It was like what the Christian families were giving their teenagers instead of like rock and roll on the radio kind of thing. I was made to go to Billy Graham. I don't know if you folks are familiar with Billy Graham. You probably are. He's pretty famous. He's an evangelical minister. He's passed away now. He passed away not too long ago. But he would speak to huge crowds. And again, my first concert was a DC Talk concert with Billy Graham speaking after the rock band. So, I was 12 or 13. And there's this whole, at the end, Billy Graham really kind of whipped up the crowd, and people would stand up. And it was very much, again, that individual relationship with Jesus, that you're going to renounce all sins and recommit to the faith. And you would see like a stadium full of people raise their hand and declare their recommitment to faith. And we would, again, engage with scientific materials. This is image here at the bottom. You can see is of the dinosaur, is of the Christian kind of natural history museum, which again takes that biblical literalist point of view that man walked alongside dinosaurs, right? So it's alternative science that we're meant to study and hold as truth. And then when we were to go out into the regular world, or the non-Christian world, or the secular world, we'd have to hold the other understanding of science as a fiction being imposed upon us, if that makes sense. So you can kind of get a sense now why those who would call themselves PPC members, in Canada, the really far right political parties, they have such a preoccupation in interfering with secular education, especially around LGBTQ plus rights right now. And it kind of links to this understanding that anything that offends this, what they view, their interpretation of the Bible is, considered an indoctrinating force that's unwanted. So where were the seedlings of my rebellion? Science class, classic literature, that I would read books that looked safe from Dad's point of view, but would have a lot of interesting and expansive ideas. Artwork was a big one for me. I was very fascinated with anything outside of my bubble, other cultures, other ideas, other religions, and the radio, which was one thing my father really couldn't manage because I had a little Sony Walkman with a radio. It was really hard for him to prevent me from engaging with non-Christian materials that way. So I started to listen to Alan Cross's Ongoing History of New Music. And it was all about like, rock and roll, punk, he'd go through the rock and roll eras, and I would listen to it religiously, and it blew my mind. And it was like my secret rebellion. Then I left home at 18, went to Western, and I did the ultimate rebellion, which is I studied anthropology. So I studied other cultures, but because it was withheld from me, or I was restricted from it, when I finally had the agency to make choices for myself, I flocked to as much information that was outside of my world as possible. And through that anthropology course, I had the great pleasure of meeting Dr. Randa Farah. I took every one of her courses. She's an incredible human being. I think she's now semi-retired. But Dr. Farah is a Palestinian Canadian. She came here I believe it was the 1980s as a refugee. She resettled and she studied. She got her doctor of anthropology at U of T. Can you imagine a Palestinian Canadian studying Palestine at U of T right now? So I just want to kind of orient those who are Canadian viewers and listeners right now to the fact that like U of T is introducing really draconian measures to suppress the study and free speech and academic freedom surrounding the study of Palestine. So, the fact that she in the 1990s had more academic freedom than we do now is noteworthy, because this is a major point of contest and friction in the academic world, where they're really, you're seeing lobby groups aggressively advance the IRA definition of anti-Semitism, deliberately to suppress academic work, such as Dr. Farah's. But she specialized in Middle East and North African studies around Palestinian refugees, but also the refugees in Western Sahara. And she was I call her my chosen mama. It was like the first time where my thinking was no longer viewed as dangerous, or my curiosity was no longer viewed as dangerous. It was something to be fed. And that's what Randa did for me. So, and also Randa is, she's a Christian Palestinian. So she introduced to me a whole different world of Christianity, what it's like for her to be Christian. She's the daughter of a man who was known as the Red Priest of Haifa. And she wrote an article about him that you should look up if you're interested. You just Google Red Priest of Haifa, and she's published it. It's about her father. But Randa blew my mind, and I'm eternally grateful for her showing up in my life when she did, or us crossing paths. It was another notable thing is that Randa is an expert on UNRWA and its history over time. So again, she would frequently publish and present on these issues of like the history of UNRWA, the history of the forcible displacement relocation of Palestinian refugees. What are the circumstances of Palestinian refugees in Jordan? And she did ethnographic research on that. So she could publish and present on these issues 20 or 30 years ago with no problem, or very little backlash. But the backlash has increased over time and gotten worse, is my understanding from what she's been telling me. When I was studying under Randa, and this was in the early aughts. So I graduated high school around 2003, and I started studying under Randa in 2004 through to about 2008. So I also did a year of master's studies under her. She was supervising me. So I took every course she offered. And then I was her teaching assistant on a forced migration course. And in the years that I worked with her and studied under her, I consistently observed harassment directed at her from students. And I didn't understand it. Like, why is this happening? Students would jump up and interrupt her lectures or make complaints against her to the administration. So much of what we're seeing, like since October the 7th, in the context of, individuals getting, complaints with their employers about their social media in support of Palestinians, people losing their jobs because of their free expression and their political opinion, their fair political opinion and expression with respect to the genocide. We're seeing all of these forms of reprisal in academic spaces, workspaces, political spaces, people being silenced and even sued or having the police sent to their door, which is what's happened in my case. We're seeing that now, but Randa has experienced it her whole life, and it's been escalating over time. So in her courses, there'd be students interrupting, smearing her as anti-Semitic. I didn't understand. And what she was explaining to me is that there was a Halil group that had identified her as a problem and were trying to get her fired. And she was, at the time I was studying with her, she was being considered for tenure. So she was under review for tenure. Thank God she got it, because they worked really hard to prevent her from acquiring tenure at Western. But she was more than qualified and worthy of receiving tenure. But there was a student group that was really aggressive in trying to disrupt her teaching practice and her work. I even remember her saying to some students we were studying, it was a course called Cultures of the Middle East. And some students stood up and they were extremely offended in how she taught one class on, the question of the dynamics between the Palestinian territories and Israel. And she taught it in a very fair way, in my perspective. She introduced, different perspectives. She talked about, it was very empirically founded. She had really great sources. And still the students demanded that they get a whole day to do a counter narrative. And so she allowed them to. And they basically downloaded kind of a PowerPoint that was already prepared for them. It was a propaganda PowerPoint where it was a complete Zionist retelling of, Israel's, expansion, like justifying Israel's expansionism effectively. I will never forget that day. It blew my mind. And I realized that the students took her course specifically to disrupt it. That was the intention of the students. There was a whole group of them. So other individuals that really kind of assisted me in my kind of deprogramming, as a Christian Zionist, then I became agnostic student, but around that same time I was studying, Dr. Norman Finkelstein had been denied tenure in the United States, and he went on a speaking tour. I saw him speak a few times. I call this his crocodile tears tour. I don't know if folks remember that video where I think he's at Waterloo and a student's, I'm German and I'm very offended at what you're saying. I don't know if you folks remember that, but there's a great clip. And he was on fire. He's always a fiery speaker, but he was especially fiery in that, at that time, because he had been denied his application for tenure. And I also did a lot of organizing and work alongside David Heap, who's still a professor at Western. He's still organizing there. But he was the one that would organize the Canada boats for Gaza. So he was organizing them back in the early aughts and into like 2010. He got arrested following his attempt to breach a blockade in 2011. And I think he's coordinating another Canada boat for Gaza now. So David Heap's amazing, and has always been an inspiration for me too. So I had the very good fortune of having early in my adult life a lot of incredible mentors in my orbit, and they gave me a lot of grace and patience for my complete ignorance to the topics or the issues related to Palestine and Palestinian sovereignty. And I just expressed to you that not everyone gets an opportunity for that deprogramming journey. So as I was expressing to you, you saw that wave of kind of evangelical revivalism that hit Canada and the US in the 1970s and 80s. Also in the 80s, you saw this idea of like the difficult child and satanic panic, right? So there was a real crackdown against Christian kids who would try to resist their indoctrination. And I sent you folks as preparatory materials, a link to the trailer for the program, which is a really compelling documentary of what also happens to Christian kids that are deemed to be rebellious or problem kids. It's basically kids that are curious and not complying well with their indoctrination. It gives a good sense of the brutality that those individuals would face in kind of resisting it. Some would even be sent off to these schools that were, very abusive to individuals, basically to break their free spirit. Also, you'll see these Christian survival camps where they'll have young people abducted and taken into the wilderness, and it's all intended to kind of break that curiosity or free spirit. And the child is constructed as difficult or as a problem. And the community is usually very supportive of these efforts because they think that the child's salvation is at risk. So it can be really brutal for a person to deprogram. There can be real severe kind of community retaliation and even a loss of liberty and abusive practices being applied against them. And, also something to consider is that many Christian Zionists have never really problematized their understanding of Israel before. They didn't have like anything that might trigger a deprogramming journey for them. So for them, the support for the Zionist project is something that is like viewed as obvious, and increasingly you're seeing it constructed as a biblical imperative to support Israel without question. And, like, for example, here's a YouTuber here he's a Christian influencer, and he gives like the top 3 Bible verses that tell Christians to support Israel, right? And Israel was chosen so that God could use them as a mouthpiece and to show, right? Like, so they, again, with that kind of biblical literalism, anything that relates to Israel or the reclamation of, that specific Holy Land is deemed as something that must be supported, not as an option or something that's nice to support. It's now constructed as an imperative. I went on to the International Christian Embassy in Jerusalem. So they have, again, there's between also, I'd say, Jewish community groups and Christian Zionist groups, there's a high level of interaction and collaboration to the extent that there's even an embassy in Jerusalem. And I found it very interesting how they identify or how they define Christian Zionism, which is they first defined Zionism as a national movement to return the Jewish people to their homeland. So against that biblical literalism, the resumption of Jewish sovereignty in the land of Israel. So again, the same kind of Old Testament foretellings that Jewish Zionists rely on, Christian Zionists rely on as well. Beyond that, they describe it as Jews of all persuasions, left and right, religious and secular, support it. So there's a complete collapse of the political diversity that exists within Jewish communities. My spouse is an anti-Zionist Jew, but there's no contemplation that there could be any kind of dissent among the Jewish community with respect to entitlement to Israel. They market it as something in which Jews are in complete consensus on, which is an obvious misrepresentation. Further, they say, they talk about the Jewish people's right to return to their homeland. So again, this narrative completely erases the Palestinian people from the view of Christian Zionists, as with the view of many, not all Jewish Zionists, is this notion of indigeneity to the land, and that anyone who is viewed as Arab is a colonizer. That it's a foretelling and divine right that has been millennia in the making, but it's an entitlement that exists according to biblical law. And again, it says Jews of all persuasions form the Zionist movement, and Christians of all persuasion can also fall within this broad definition of Christian Zionism. So, that's kind of how the narrative is presented. It's very shallow and it's a reframing of facts, and it's dependent on, again, that biblical literalism. And it collapses any kind of, or doesn't really offer any space for a broader analysis of anything that'd be inconsistent with that narrative. So how does it affect Canadian foreign policy? You can see it, I think, especially with this last election, how powerfully this notion of Christian Zionism is entrenched within our political parties, for example. So Pierre Poilievre identifies as Christian Zionist, and he, I think, almost every major kind of Jewish social group in their social media, once Carney especially assumed leadership, made a very kind of clear call that the community should be voting conservative. And, again, you can see here that Poilievre is, basically in the way he conducted his campaign, that he sees these two kind of pillars of his platform, which is Zionism and Christianity, is very integrated, right? He spent quite a bit of time with in his campaigning to evangelical Christians. So, but we see a lot of the same kind of Christian Zionism reflected in the Liberal Party, especially under Trudeau's cabinet. Lots of Christian and Jewish Zionists, and also Zionists of other religious and backgrounds too. But Trudeau himself, and right at the time he was stepping down, was very unapologetically declarative of his Zionism. And he declared himself publicly a Zionist at the National Forum on Combating Anti-Semitism in Ottawa a few months back. It was very recent, actually. What date is that? I don't have the date down, but that was very recent. Yeah. Even Mark Miller is a Zionist. So I view that as a conflict of interest when you're dealing with anything related to Palestinians. He created the Gaza program, but he had an ideological conflict. And I think that's absolutely a huge reason why we see the Gazan family reunification program is so deficient, because there is this ideological bias or underpinning to, current governance in Canada. So that's just a high-level review of my journey from an evangelical Zionist upbringing to becoming, I don't know how I'd identify myself now. I guess agnostic. I'm now an immigration and refugee lawyer. My spouse is an anti-Zionist Jewish person, and we've been doing everything we can in the past 18 months to resist this narrative that all Jews support Israel, which is, my spouse, if he wanted to, could claim Israeli citizenship if he wanted to, but chooses not to. And he's, we're supportive of anti-Zionist human rights movements within Canada and wanting to be the best kind of solidarity activists as we can for Palestinians. So, I mean, when I love Randa with my whole heart. I call her my chosen mama, and I love my spouse with my whole heart. And I have room in my heart for all of that. These divisions, I just wanted to kind of use my story to express where the divisions lie and why it is so difficult for Christian Zionists to kind of self-deprogram. There's these social forces that work against them in accomplishing that. So my trajectory is unusual. And I think in that way, it kind of makes me unusual in that I came from a background, but I've totally flipped in terms of my current work and worldview. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them. I hope that wasn't too much or too long.
That was awesome. Thank you so much, Joanna. I don't see anybody's hand up, so maybe I'll ask my first question. I like that there's sound effects in this, like you noted earlier. I didn't notice that before. So there were some claps there.
I heard some at the beginning too, and I was like, did I just hallucinate that? Or like, what is that?
more clapping. So one of my first questions is like, kind of like charity and helping the poor and helping people facing oppression. Those are like fundamental parts of all religions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, including Christianity, and like, and so, but that obviously conflicts with what's going on in all over the world, not just in Gaza.
Yeah.
And so, like, how can, like, what do you think would be like the best kind of biblical kind of way to address that? Because like you kind of have that inside knowledge too, right? And we had a pastor speak at one of our events like a few months ago, one of my neighbors, and we might have another one speaking from a different Christian denomination in a few weeks again. And so, yeah, like how are there biblical kind of points of view that can be shared with all different types of Christians that can kind of recenter them on these core values that are part of all religions, including Christianity?
I mean, what the Gospels of Jesus, you know what I mean? I feel like that's what's been lost, at least among the more, again, I have to be very clear, not speaking or painting all denominations with a broad brush, but rather wanting to emphasize that this is just a very specific movement within Christianity, and there's very different responses from different denominations with respect to, and we'll let Ted jump in too, but I'll just say, like the United Church has been very clear in their support of Palestinians, for example. The Catholic Church, we saw the Pope on Easter Monday, his last statement before his death was in support of Palestinians. So I guess what I'm trying to express in terms of what denomination or course of branch of Christianity that's kind of most active in informing our foreign policy would be that one, the kind of the Lutheran or the Evangelical Zionist movement. And I'll leave other people to comment on, like, I haven't really studied Christianity since I left home. So maybe someone else has a better perspective in terms of how to reorient people. But I think it really depends on what space they come from. You have to kind of meet them from their experience.
Right. Ted, would you like to speak?
Yeah, I'd very much like to speak. You can hear me, okay?
You're loud and clear. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I spend a lot of time thinking about this, and I welcome others to join in. I'm not, I can go into some of my own background, but I'll just skip over that. And what I'm going to say is in my humble opinion, and I welcome others to contribute, but in my humble opinion, the cornerstone of all Christianity is the Great Commandment. It's right there in the Gospels. It's there when a person approaches Jesus, and says, "Rabbi, can you sum up God's commandment while standing on one foot?" And the answer is the Great Commandment. And you can look it up, and many of you, maybe all of you, know it. I like to put it in modern day terms, which in my modern day terms, it's be authentic. Whatever you say, you believe, whatever you say should be followed, whether it's between you and other people, you and the divine, that's what you should do. Be authentic. Do what you say what you do. That's the first half. And the second half, which is just as important, is love your neighbor just as you love yourself and the members of your family and so forth and so on. So if you treat any religion like a buffet where you can choose what to take and what not to take, and if within the umbrella of Christianity, you're taking a position that totally negates the Great Commandment, whereas you're not loving your neighbor, but you're hating them, you're fearing them, you're attacking them, you're lying to them, you're stealing from them, threatening them, hurting them, and killing them. You're not in under the umbrella of Christianity anymore. So maybe I was a little bit wordy with that. I'm a better writer than I am a speaker, but that gets to the heart of this. Some aspects of this Christian Zionism, and I know this is being recorded, but in my humble opinion, it's a lunatic death cult that's accepting the murder of women and children. We have reports, we have documented 94% of the casualties in Gaza over the last month are women and children. How is this loving your neighbor? I'll leave it there. That's my short answer.
Thank you. Ishtiaq, please.
Yeah. I was listening to Tim and an idea formed in my head. So as some of you know, I'm a marketing consultant, and this whole idea that Tim proposed, right? That if you're a Christian, you have to obey the 10 Commandments, right? Which politician in the last decade or so has actually followed? Like, all it has done is divide and conquer, and I hate. I mean, I feel like that's a marketing campaign to be launched. Right? Anybody who this is what he's saying about his neighbors. All right, we have to. Recently we have had some trouble in this region, as you know, Salman. All right, and neighbors are at arms with one another, and it's like the people at the bottom die, but people at the top who cause all the trouble always remain, and it's problematic basically, right? And I think it's the thing, right? It's just there should be a way to use this what Tim said, right, into a campaign basically. I'm sure we can find politicians saying all kinds of weird stuff, all right? And if they're going after conservatives, then because hey, yeah, he doesn't really believe as what he claims to believe, all right, or whatever. He's not in that camp basically. And I think that should be maybe this is something we can discuss after the fact or whatever. Thank you.
Thank you, Ishtiaq. And speaking of marketing campaign. I don't see any other questions, so I'm just gonna share something. One of our friends here on the call shared an idea with me, which is like a marketing campaign saying love Israel, hate the genocide. And I think that's a brilliant idea. And I've shared it with a few other people who are currently not on the call, like who can kind of visualize that potentially. But I'm not sure if they're going to do it yet. I don't know if that person wants to speak up. If not, that's okay. And like, I think that's something that could be really powerful. Again, love Israel, hate the genocide, right? And so then you're not, from that Christian perspective, you're not attacking the homeland of Jesus and preventing Jesus from coming back or anything like that. But you're saying, okay, you're not following the simple 10 commandments, right? You're not complying with the great commandment, right? As Ted mentioned. Gardy, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. All right. So I don't know. My camera may not be. I don't know whether it's working or not. Yeah. So I think it's a good idea, and for many practical, strategic, tactical, and well, for many reasons, basically, because one of the shields to that is used by the pro-Zionist approach or the pro-Zionist camp is to say, anybody who states or presents an opinion that is not aligned with the Zionist views, that you're anti-Semitic, you hate Israel, you're a Jew hater. So this would probably provide some cover, and at the same time, it would also give people the opportunity of embracing with Israel, because Israel as a concept, as an idea, as a nation, as a faith, there's probably a lot of good things to say. And so one does not need to be totally radical, but at the very least, you can take the time to understand what their perspective is, but just at least open the tent and grab opinions from the Zionist camp, from the anti-Zionist camp, from the Muslim camp, wherever, from the atheist camp, which is where I stand, and just say, okay, fine. Never mind what you think about Israel as a state. We just cannot accept genocide. It's something that we can agree with. We can all enter under that tent and say, I don't care why we're doing this. Killing women and children is unacceptable. And I'm willing to say that Israel is a state. Israel is an entity that can exist and actually does exist. Whether you say it can exist or not, that's a different matter, but it does exist. Put that to the side. We cannot be killing people like that because it's unacceptable. So from my perspective, I'd be willing to drape myself in the Israeli flag as long as we're able to agree and say we can't kill people like that. It's unacceptable. So that's my thoughts on the matter.
And ensure that Israel is not given this pariah, impunity status that it enjoys under international law. This is like exceptional treatment under the purview of international legal systems and humanitarian law. There's carve-outs for Israel especially and the United States, and we have to advocate to accept and to kind of, as you said, I'd be willing to drape myself in the flag so long as we understand maybe that the best way that we can bring forward these notions of the commandments, these principles enshrined under the commandments, is through the operation of international humanitarian law and its fair application. Because fundamentally, those laws exist to prevent, contraventions of, basic dignity and human rights, which are, in the same way enshrined under the 10 Commandments, right? Like, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet, right? So I think that might be the intellectual linkages that need to be made, that you can satisfy the commandments of God in advocating for international humanitarian law.
Correct.
And Joanna, like that, again, that campaign idea, love Israel, hate genocide, hate apartheid, right? Like, do you think something like that would have had any traction with people that you have known in your former community or still know in your community, like your family, your friends?
Something like this needs to happen, because I think a lot of the Christians that are within my orbit are feeling this cognitive dissonance, right? That what's happening and what they're seeing on their phones is so offensive to the Bible and their teachings, and yet they don't know how to support Israel and also remain compliant with the other strictures of the Bible, right? So offering them an easy path to that is really important. And in fact, I think that maybe the pro-Israel lobby depends on the fact that there is no resource like this. They would suppress it, right? Because they want absolute Christian fealty to Israel, no matter what.
Right. Gardy, please.
Yeah, I think the flip coin of love Israel, hate the genocide is hate terrorism, love the Palestinians, right? So love life. You can hate terrorism all day long, because they often equate support of life in Gaza as a pro-terrorist type of position. Well, again, you don't have to accept that framing. You can say, I hate terrorism, but I also love life and I love the Palestinian people. That's the different sides of the same coin, where the framing you put in a box. The box is either hate Israel and or love Hamas. Well, you can actually segment it in a different way and present your own framing. So that's another way of that it could be presented as well.
I like that. Yeah.
Yes, and it also, if I may, it also opens doors in terms of communication perspective, because media will not talk to you or touch anything you say unless you actually claim that you're anti-terrorism or that you actually support Israel. Once you say that, the door is open. You can actually at least wedge through that door and actually present a message that people would be willing to listen to.
Yeah, it's the discourse is too polarized, I think, is what you're saying. And there's these middle zones of discourse that are just completely obfuscated, or there is no space for them. I remember sitting on a panel of pro-Pali activists, and somebody kind of confronted me because I had posted I'm a pacifist. It's actually the relative in my family who I'm most closely aligned is that great grandmother I never met, who was the Mennonite, right? Pacifism, anti-war, these ideologies are what appeal most to me. And somebody almost kind of kept me out of the conversation because I didn't declare like an absolute and unconditional support for all forms of violent resistance. And I said, how can you be at this table if you're a pacifist? And I said, I think pacifists should be at every table, right? It should be something we bake into, especially every war table or every conflict table, that you should build in pacifist voices. Like, why not have a diversity of perspectives? Yeah. And why we should always consider the pacifist option if it's viable, right? Or they might have another creative opportunity that might be, an alternative to violence that might not have been contemplated by folks that are more, folk singularly minded, right? So I like this notion that we're this is a really cool kind of idea for a campaign in terms of an educational campaign that's more accessible, I think, to diverse communities.
Yeah, I think this is an awesome idea to kind of run with, spearhead, and then, I shared it with a graphics professional who makes really compelling videos. I'm hoping that he does something with it. That's not guaranteed. But maybe we can recruit more people for this idea. Maybe even the Bystanders No More team, because their whole goal is to, speak to the silent majority, and that Bystanders No More, that literally started as an idea in one of these meetings a year and a half ago, almost. Then our amazing friend Dr. Raj Tamateram ran with it, led it, and turned it into a reality. And so the thing that Gardy mentioned, like basically make the tent bigger. And Joanna kind of said it in a different way as well. Get through more doors. That we really need to do that. And then because I'm not a Christian, I have no involvement in the Christian community. Like I didn't realize that there is this, kind of tension, this cognitive dissonance, right, within the community, and that's just something I'm personally unaware of. Are you able to share any more details about that? And basically I'm just thinking about it from the perspective of this potential campaign, Love Israel,
Sure.
Genocide, Hate Apartheid.
I'll give a bit more insight from the view of cognitive dissonance. So even, I had a lot of more Christians in my life before October 2023 than I do now. So they were fine with me being an immigration. They saw themselves as progressive. But on the issue of Israel, it was a non-starter. You know what I mean? Like to the point where it was a very kind of violent ending to long friendships and family relationships. So there's definitely, remember, folks go, to church maybe once a week or once every other week or whatever, but there's absolutely an intentional mission to integrate this idea of expansionist Zionism into the content that is being offered up in churches. I think the way to break through that, because, for the first year of the bombardment of Gaza and the West Bank, a lot of there was extreme censorship through legacy media of what was happening. So not all of the boomer generation, and I find the boomers tend to be probably the most ardent of the Christian Zionists right now. The media in which they're engaging was not covering things, but I think at this point now it's just unescapable. The confrontation of this cognitive dissonance, they can't reconcile it. So at least they could, deny the facts or accept alternative facts or accept bad media, and they could reconcile that cognitive dissonance with a CNN report. You know what I mean? That would misinform them or something. But I think now there's the general factual consensus is there that it's they can't turn away or excuse it anymore. They understand it as a genocide. So I think it's about, so I get this sense of you're kind of seeing either people kind of dropping off and going quiet and not really knowing what to do. So I think that Bystanders No More for the silent majority would be extremely impactful for that group. Or you see those that are just so ideological, they're getting extremely aggressive. in their social media content, and the aggressive group that are trying to again maintain this absolute like no daylight between us and Israel attitude are tying in the colonizing project right now to end times. Okay, so they think this is part of the playbook for end times, and once this expanded or the greater Israel is established, then we'll see the second coming of Christ. So I think also kind of appreciating that where Christians are at now, the ones that are really like kind of all in and like have no real care about the blood that is shed, they tend to be the ones that are in this mentality that it's the end time. And I don't think it's worth engaging with them at all, because
Right.
How do you persuade? To them, there's nothing is too dear. Everything must be sacrificed, right? There's no way of reasoning with someone in that mindset. So what we're pointing to are those that are maybe less doctrinal, more pragmatic, and are really struggling with trying to reconcile the 10 Commandments, the Gospels of Jesus, with what they're seeing on their phone screens now.
Right. And bystanders no more is, intentionally secular. You can almost even say like Europe focused, and they've had great success as well. They've done a lot of amazing work. Probably kind of opened up at least several thousand kind of minds. But this kind of campaign could be specifically targeted at Christian communities.
Maybe
and
we
so-
partner with a United Church, or my friend Alex Vernon, for example, he's an immigration lawyer. He's a progressive Catholic. I think just kind of finding the right Christians that are already within our communities and asking them, maybe we can do in collaboration, create a resource that's just more accessible to the Christians that are like really struggling right now and reconciling what they're seeing and how they're voting with what the tenets of their faith.
Right. Ted is asking if he can ask you Canadian immigration related question from your
Sure, maybe we stop recording
yeah,
if you want. We can put a pin in the.
and then we can also okay. So first I'll stop recording. Just bear with me a second.